Thank you for coming to the workshop of breaking the homework scoring homework cycle. So my name is Mr. Dale Owens, and privileged to have you in here today. So I have learned a few things in doing this session that I have about an hour's worth to give you in 45 minutes. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to dive in, okay? So here's what we've got. So just because a child has homework doesn't necessarily mean that we have a problem. Could be that day that child has maybe had problems in one of the paces, maybe struggled with some things. Maybe that was a day that the child was just not quite able to focus correctly at 100% level maybe that day. Maybe little Johnny went up to the scoring station and Susie was on the other side and she smiled at him just right, you know, and he's done for the day, you know. But we're talking about that child that has nightly homework. I mean, every night this child's coming home with homework. Every night he comes in and he's got 2, maybe 3 paces of goals to do, and so it's every night. And then the next day they're scoring. Every morning little Johnny's coming in. I hate to pick on little Johnny. I didn't even have a Johnny in my learning center. If there's any Johnnies in here, I'm sorry. But had little Johnny in there, and every day he comes in. He's got this big pile of homework that he's got to score from the night before. Not only score it, but he's got to correct it, rescore it, and he wants to take the lunchtime to get it done. Some of you are nodding your head and smiling. You're picturing that child in your learning center. And because of that day he's unable to get that day's goals done. And so then it's homework again and again and again. And the cycle just keeps getting bigger and bigger for this child. But what I want you to realize is when this vicious cycle appears, it quickly becomes overwhelming for that student. And that child feels like they have come to the point of no return. So we want to think about the child and what we can do to help this child. So what's the problem? Somebody might be here saying, you know what? It's homework. What's the big deal? Well, because of the system that A.C.E. has, there should be minimal homework. There should not be a lot of homework if the goals are being met. But when this cycle appears, goals are not being met. So to start with, we're not meeting those daily goals that are being set by the student. And because of this, and the goals are not being met, then you've got a student that becomes defeated. They get at a place to where they feel like they cannot do what all other children in the Learning Center are able to do. See, that child, there's something about setting goals and accomplishing that goals that is very self-satisfying. But that child's not able to feel that. And so after a while of that child becomes very defeated. And then you've got disgruntled parents. I mean, you just watched Dr. Dale Johnson in the spirit of Dr. Dale Johnson's Hoya Moya. Isn't that what he said? I don't know what that means, but that's what he said. And so you got disgruntled parents, and who wants that? I mean, when parents get in this place and the child is continually having this homework every night, then the parents get upset with you and your staff, and they start blaming you. And they'll begin to ask questions like this: why does my child always have homework? And you know, we don't announce in the Learning Center who has homework, so therefore they feel like they're the only one that has homework when they go home sometime. And then they may even say stuff like this: well, maybe you're just not doing your job. Or maybe they'll ask you this: why can't you make him do his work at school? Have you ever heard that question before? Yeah. And then they may even say stuff like this: well, maybe this just isn't the best place for my child. So disgruntled parents, who wants that? So to further explain or investigate the issue, what is this problem? Well, what are the A.C.E. procedures for having homework? To start with, we have daily goal setting. The student sets the goal every day. They set those goals. That way, that student bears the responsibility to meet that goal. And then we have homework assignment slips. You say, well, you know, we don't let the students set their goals. Well, you ought to start that. You know, they're going to go to college one day, and there's going to be a professor in there that really couldn't care less if they do their work or not. So they need to learn how to set goals and accomplish goals to get those things done. And then you say, well, we don't use homework assignment slips. We don't send that home. Well, you should. If you have to, make your own. But kind of somehow, you know, let that parent know. Inform that parent that that child has homework. It's needful to communicate with them. And then the parent signs that, saying that they realize, not that the student has completed the homework, but that they recognize the student has homework. And then the student bears the responsibility of getting the homework done and meeting the goals. And A.C.E. program puts that responsibility on the student. We're trying to teach them some responsibility. Isn't that something this generation needs to learn? I mean, they need to find out there is more to do in life than play video games and watch movies. You know, there is other things in life that they need to be responsible for. And but then you have this student that you realize and you recognize has this reoccurring homework struggle. When you recognize that in a student, there's two things you need to do. You need to see, first of all. First of all, see what that student is doing in that student office. It might be he's sitting in there fiddling around. Y'all recognize the term. I'm from the South, and you understand. I talk a little different than most people in the world, but we use that word fiddling around. Now, maybe he's just fiddling with things. I mean, have you ever seen them using their crayons for tractors, you know, and they're all over the place, just fiddling around with stuff? I walked by a student office one time of a child, and he had his calculator tore apart. He had the 4 screws lined up over here, had the modules out of that calculator, had the little rubber face with the buttons on it here and the case over here. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm sorry, Preacher Dale. I just got to fiddling with stuff, and before I knew it, it's all to pieces." And so maybe he's in there just fiddling around. Maybe he's doodling on paper, drawing, writing, maybe writing notes to the student in the next office, or writing notes to her boyfriend, or drawing pictures, you know, of the supervisor or something. You wouldn't believe some of the ones I've had drawn of me through the years, with some of them with a pitchfork and tail and horns and everything. I mean, maybe he's in there sleeping. You ever walk by a student office and the child's supposed to be reading that social studies story or science, and they've leaned over against that divider, and before you know it, their head's doing this, and maybe he's sleeping in that student office. Maybe he's daydreaming in the office. We have 4 children. Hannah's my oldest. She's 23. Haley Grace is the next one. We named her Haley Grace because she got here by the grace of God with a lot of complications. But then we had a set of twin boys, Joshua and Caleb. Now Joshua, I mean, he's a go-getter. Son, he'll work like a mule, and he'd get in there on that goals that day. He'll have them finished. He's he's very motivated in his schoolwork, because he knew as soon as he got done, he was done. So he wanted to get done. And you give him 20 verses, memory verses to do, you know, or 25, whatever it was for the month. By the end of the first day, he's set them. By the end of the second day, he could do them backwards, verse for verse. And he's very motivated. But Caleb, on the other hand, that was a different story. We force-fed that child an education. I mean, he got it not by desire, but by demand. He'd say, "Dad, I can make more money cutting grass than you do, Pastor." And I said, "That's true, but you're still going to do your schoolwork." And so anyway, we forced him. So I asked him, I said, "Son, what are you doing that's keeping you from getting your goals done?" He said, "I don't know, Dad." Said, "I just daydreaming." I said, "What are you daydreaming about?" He said, "Well, I mean, you know, daydreaming about the ball game this afternoon, or PE, what we're going to get to do. Are we going in the gym? We're going outside. What are we going to do? Lunch?" You know, he said, "All morning I'm day." If you see my boys eat, you'd understand that one. I told my wife we should have called them Hoover and Electrolux. They suck up everything in the house, you know. And so he said, "Sometimes I'm daydreaming about the girl on the other side of the learning center." You know, he said, "Just daydreaming." So maybe that child's sitting in there daydreaming. And you know, that little girl may be in there and she's got a little picture of her boyfriend. You may not think he's all that, but she's sitting there dreamy-eyed looking at that picture. Sometimes you need to get some of those things out of the way so they can get their schoolwork done. So see, first of all, what's going on in that student office. Take about 15 minutes of the day and walk by as many times as you can. Look over their shoulder and find out what they're doing in that student office. And then second of all, speak to that child. Sometimes you need to pull them aside, and they may be able to bear light on something going on in that learning center or in that student office that you know nothing about. So see what's going on, then speak to them. And then I need to mention flexibility, and I've got it in my notes if you won't see it. It's bold-faced, underlined with exclamation points at the end. Be real careful right here. You better know that in flexibility, what you do for one child, you better be ready to do for every child. But Psalm 139:14 says something like this: "For we are all fearfully and wonderfully made." Do you know there's no 2 students in that learning center that are alike? even if they are identical twins. There's no two kids. You've got some children in there that can do that physical science and they will never raise their flag for help. You have them that can do Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry. They can memorize the proofs. They can do all that work. They can use a compass. They can use a protractor and they know which one's which, and they'll never raise their flag and ask for help. But you got other students. You're going to have to help them through. You have some kids, buddy, I mean, they'll take off and you can remember them coming all the way up through there and hardly ever did they raise their flag needing help with schoolwork. Then you do have some that you're going to have to help all the way through. And sometimes we have to be flexible and not quite so stiff. So remember that. They're all different. A.C.E. celebrates the uniqueness and the individuality of each child. They're all different. So we need to remember that. So what are some common causes? Well, you know, there's probably 100 different causes we go over, but we only have 45 minutes. So I'm going to give you some common causes that I have seen that cause this cycle. And it helps us to know how we can help this child when we know why they're there. So sometimes we need to look at this. What are some causes? Well, sometimes it's an issue of diagnosis. Every child that comes into your learning center needs to take a diagnostic test. It is imperative that a child be correctly diagnosed. It might be if they're not diagnosed properly, they will struggle with comprehension. They may not comprehend the material because they're not in the right level of the material. It might be they'll struggle with the reading level if they're not in the right reading level. Some will do the math and the English, but they don't even do the reading level diagnostic test, and they're in the wrong reading level. They struggle with the words, maybe their meanings or their pronunciation, and they struggle with that. And a child that's not properly diagnosed, the workload might be too heavy, or it could be too light, not challenging enough. And in that, they will not be very motivated. So they definitely need to take a diagnostic test. You say, well, now hang on a minute, Richard L. Now they did the homeschooling. They A.C.E. homeschooled it, using A.C.E. So surely we can just bring them in. Well, I have learned through the years that just because they're home don't necessarily mean they're schooling. And just because they're schooling doesn't necessarily mean they're doing it correctly. So you need to make sure they're in the right place with that diagnostic test. And I need to say this, that is the very first place that sets us apart from all other programs. There may be other good programs out there. I really don't know. But I'll be honest with you, that diagnostic test sets us apart from all others. We can find the place in the curriculum where that child can be successful in their learning. Isn't that wonderful? And it's an individual thing, not a cookie cutter type thing. So I love that. So they need to have a diagnostic test. Then it could be lack of motivation. You ever seen a child not very motivated? Boy, I have never seen a generation as hard to motivate as this generation that we're raising right now. Now, I mean, when I was growing up, boy, you could make, my daddy used to say he was going to work on my motivation. He wasn't talking about my self-esteem either. I probably shouldn't go there, especially with the video. You know, some children in your learning center are 5 years old. They'll know what they want to be when they grow up. But you have some in that learning center that'll be 30, and they still don't know what they want to be when they grow up. My daughter was 7, the oldest daughter. She works now in veterinary medicine. I walked in her bedroom. She has her animals, stuffed animals, laid across her bed. And she had tape on her arm and yarn run up on the wall and had Glad bags stuck to the wall with thumbtack. Like they had IVs running in them, you know. And my little 6-year-old daughter, Haley, she was keeping the charts. They had charts for each one of them. She was taking all the vital signs and everything. And they was doing surgery and all kinds of stuff in there. It was amazing. And I couldn't believe it. And she's always been motivated to be in veterinary medicine. That's what she does today. She loves it. But, you know, there's other kids that's not that motivated. So how can we motivate them? Well, I feel like we can motivate them through some positive encouragement. Sometimes you can encourage a child. You know, we had a child come in our learning center that I think she's in like the 7th grade. We did the diagnostic test. Man, she placed back like the 3rd grade. You've had it. You've seen it. All of y'all have seen that. But I want to tell you about this child. She was in the public school system. She was falling behind. They were going to put her in a resource class, and so they come to us and said, can you please help us? I said, sure, we'll do what we can. We brought her in, got to working with her. That kid was very motivated. And I tell you what, I didn't realize what all was going on there. And so come to find out later on, I was walking through the Learning Center one morning, early one morning, about 5, 6 o'clock, because I'd go up there early, I'd do my devotions, I'd walk through there and pray over them student offices and over the supervisors and monitors, and I'd spend a lot of quiet time up there by myself. And I walked by her office one morning, and I seen a note on her desk that my wife, her supervisor, had left. And it said, "Girl, you're doing a good job. You keep up the good work. I love you and I'm praying for you. You keep on." Buddy, she graduated on time, come back an extra year because she wanted to do the honors program. You know, sometimes that child just needs a pat on the back. Somebody to motivate them with a little encouragement. Somebody to say, "I believe in you." They may or may not get that at home. So sometimes they need some positive encouragement. Sometimes maybe it's a positive role model. Maybe you spotted somebody that child that's struggling with this cycle right here, somebody in the church that child looks up to. Maybe you want to bring them in one morning in open assembly and let them give a devotion. Cause that kid maybe spark something in them to dig in and go after it, you know. Maybe they want to be a veterinarian, and you know a good Christian vet you could bring in to give devotion one morning and talk about going to school and doing their studies and where they went to school and talk about God. We had some boys struggling with that, and he wanted to be a police officer. So my wife's brother's a highway patrolman in North Carolina, and he likes to be that old rough, tough exterior, you know. So he comes in there with his uniform, his pistol, his walkie-talkie, his badge and everything. Got his bulletproof vest on under there and everything. He walks in there just like a tough guy, you know. But see, I know him. And so he broke that Bible open, started giving devotion. Next thing you know, he's weeping and crying and wiping tears, talking about how much he loved the Lord, being born again, and how much he wished he could have been in that kind of environment growing up. And hey, next thing you know, boy, that little old kid, his eyes are big, you know. And hey, all he ever saw was the rough, tough exterior. But he got to see one melt right before his eyes. Thank God, in the glory of God. And I was glad he got to see that. And so maybe you can motivate them with a positive role model. Maybe some positive reinforcements like merits, or maybe you want them to use points, whatever y'all do in your learning center, or maybe just a little incentive like cookies or something on Friday afternoon. We don't have homework all week. Maybe you want to do something like that. We'll talk about a little more of that. Maybe something that would cause this cycle to be distractions. You know, sometimes there are distractions in the learning center that keep students from being able to do their schoolwork. Things like loud talking. You ever been in a learning center where the supervisor and the monitor is talking real loud? Or maybe they let the students turn around in their offices and talk out loud, distracting everybody in the learning center. You know why whenever you come to supervisors and administrative training, why we don't holler at you from 15 foot away and say, "Yes, ma'am, can I help you?" You know why? Because it distracts everybody along that whole side of the learning center. So loud talking distracts. Laughter distracts. Laughter is a distraction. If you got people laughing in the hallway or laughing in the next room, I was sitting in a CEC conference just like you're in right now. And I was sitting right next to an air wall, and there's cracks in that air wall. And on the other side was Dr. Dale Johnson, and he had them rolling, son. I couldn't tell you what the session was about I was in. I don't even remember who was talking, but I know a couple of jokes he told while I was in there because he had my attention. I leaned over against the air wall. So, hey, laughter, loud noises in the hallway or outside or in the building somewhere, loud noises can distract. There's all kind of things in the learning center that could distract. And I walked by one day, one of our learning centers, and there was a supervisor in the learning center, and she had we had the Readmaster program set up on computers over in the corner, 2 or 3 over there. And so what she was doing, she sat back at her desk, and I walked by and heard her holler at one of the kids and say, "John, it's time for you to go to the Readmaster." I thought, did I really just hear what I thought I just heard? And I backed up and looked in there and said, "John, it's your turn, Readmaster." I thought, what's going on? You know, we've been to training. We've done the training here. We do things the way it's supposed to be here. This isn't how it goes, you know. So I just kindly spoke to her that afternoon and said, "Sister, we don't holler out in the learning center to the students, you know." And so you know what I found out she was doing when I wasn't around? she would holler to the kids that had their flags to come to her desk so she could answer their questions. I said, no. This isn't how we do things at A.C.E. Learning Center. This is how we're going to do things. You know, and I kind of showed how it's supposed to go, and we kind of corrected some of that. So those things can be distractions. Maybe it's that child next to them. Maybe that child next to them's tapping. My wife, if you're tapping, you know, and my boys will do it at the table just to aggravate her, you know, because they're grown men now and they know she can't whoop them. But, you know, sometimes, that bothers my wife so bad she can't stand it. Is that bothering any of y'all? maybe that student next to him got that pen, that click, 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 click. Does that ever bother y'all, you know? And so maybe they're humming or talking. Oh my, I got to tell you this, y'all were there. You may know which one I'm talking about, I hope you don't. But my daughter was in the administrator's training this summer because she started working in customer service. And she was sitting over there, and I got to work in administrator's training this summer, and I loved it. I enjoyed that so much. And I was going from one flag to the other, and I like doing that. I like running the learning center, getting them flags. And so I was going from one to the other, and I heard talking over there. I thought, what is that, you know? So I went on and got a flag. I come back through, I thought, it's getting louder. What is that? Where's that at, you know? And it went on back. So finally I spotted it. And there was a lady sitting right next to my daughter, and she was trying to learn her memory verse. And you that have been to administrative training is going to know exactly what I'm talking about. So she's sitting in there, and she's got her eyes closed, and she's getting a little bit louder as she goes, and she gets down to the end, and she said, and thou shalt write them upon the post of thy house and on thy gate. I got tickled, you know. Well, right next to her is my daughter, and she's shaking. She's laughing so hard. And I asked her, I said, Haley, what's going on? She said, Dad, it's all day long like that. Said she'll talk to herself, she'll hum. Said there was one time she just was discussing one of the questions with herself. And I looked over there to see if there's anybody over there, but it was just her. She said, it's a bad distraction for me. I can't concentrate. So it might be distractions in the learning center. Then, you know, sometimes there's distractions at the house. Sometimes there's distractions at home. Do you know you have children that will walk into your learning center and they can't turn off what's going on at the house? Had this kid come to our school. He's 12 years old when he came, already bigger than me, just a great big old teddy bear. And I love him to death. His name's Jonathan. If I was to see Jonathan today, if I was to go back to North Carolina and see him in Walmart, he'd drop everything he's doing and run across Walmart to put his arms around me and pick me up and tell me how much he misses me and how much he loves me. I love that kid. And I'm going to tell you, we brought him in. He had a terrible home life. Jonathan's mom married a guy that hated Jonathan, jealous of him, bitterness there, and bad situation. When Jonathan was 11 years old, his mama kicked him out of the house. His daddy didn't want him. His grandparents didn't want him. His great aunt and uncle starts raising him. Clarence and Dorothy loved him to death. Clarence has gone home to heaven now. But they were in their late 70s, early 80s when they got Jonathan. And they brought him to me and said, Preacher Dale, can you help us? I said, brother, we'll do all we can do. You know, we got him in there. I had trouble out of Jonathan. I did. I'll be honest with you. But I knew God wanted me to bring him in. And just prayed over that thing. Finally, I said, yep, we can take him. And so we brought old Jonathan in and got to working with him. Man, I was punishing Jonathan every week. Seemed like some weeks every day. It was all the time. Well, boy, we got down that first Christmas. And Jonathan brought me a Christmas card. It's just no average Christmas card, you know, and signed it. But inside of it, he put a letter in there, about a 2-page letter. Down at the end of that letter, he said, you're like the dad that I never had. And, boy, I never thought about what all that kid was going through at the house until then. I sat there and wept like a baby. And a few years went by. He was driving by then, and Jonathan, boy, he'd been through things. His dad bought him a go-kart one year for Christmas, said it didn't run, it's rusted up. And he said, if you'll get this fixed up and painted, said, I'll give it to you for Christmas. Boy, he did. He worked on it every day. Worked on it, come talk to me every day about it. Say, where'd I get this at? Where'd I get this at? What would you do here? How would you do that? Boy, we talked about it, and I'd help him best I could. And he got it fixed, took pictures of it, showed me his riding it and everything, you know, and he just tickled to death with that thing. And come back after Christmas, old Jonathan had anger built up in him. Boy, I could see it. I said, Jonathan, what's wrong with you, buddy? He said, Preacher Dale, you remember that go-kart? I said, yeah. He said, my daddy sold that thing. He said, he went down to the grocery store and bought me a watermelon and gave me that for Christmas. Boy, you just don't know what they're dealing with at the house. One Friday he's leaving school. He's driving by now. That's what I was going to tell you. He's driving by now, and he's going to leave school. And he said, "Bye, Miss Christie." My wife said, "Bye, Jonathan. I'll see you Monday, buddy." He said, "No, Miss Christie, you ain't going to see me Monday." He said, "I'm going out here and I'm going to find me a tree and wrap my truck around it, and I'm getting out of this world. There's nobody loves me." I want to tell you something. You don't know when they walk in your learning center what they're facing back at the house. Sometimes they come in there and they can't just cut that off in their mind and focus on that learning center work and their school work. You know, sometimes they're struggling. Little old boy raised his hand one morning and said, "Pray for my mom and dad." Said, my daddy beat the fire out of her last night. You know, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So there may be distractions at the house, personal distractions, family distractions. Sometimes there's homework distractions. You know, time was when having homework meant you hunkered down in a quiet place free from all distractions and did your schoolwork. But nowadays, according to LA Times Bloomberg poll, they say that 59% of teenage girls admit they like doing at least one other thing while doing homework. They are now embracing distractions instead of pushing them away while doing homework. They say that 27% admit that they do at least 3 other things while doing homework. Here's what Dr. Walsh, the leading researcher, said. He said, "Can texting, tweeting, talking with friends on the phone or online, checking Facebook, watching TV, playing video games, listening to music, or several of these at once coexist with successful learning?" He says no, and so do I. The fondness of multitasking is raising concerns among psychologists and educators alike. They say that they are afraid that it is stunning the prefrontal cortex of the adolescent brain. That part of that's called the executive center that shifts from one task to another to multitask is also the part of the brain that determines correct social and moral behavior. We've already got a sin problem. We sure don't need to affect that part of the brain, do we? So here we are. We've got distractions in the learning center, distractions at home. Dr. Walsh, I need to tell you this. I just like it. But Dr. Walsh has a book coming out. I'm not a big avid reader, but the name of it is this: "No, Why Kids of All Ages Need to Hear It and Ways Parents Need to Say It." I kind of like that book. I might get that one. All right, so it could be a lack of sleep. Maybe a child's not getting enough sleep. According to researchers, adults need 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night to function at 100%. Say that children, teenagers need 9 to 9.5 hours of sleep. The early grade school kids need between 9 and 11 hours to function at 100%. So when they're coming into the learning center and they can't focus and they can't stay awake, it might be they're up watching movies or playing video games until it was real late and they can't focus and they can't get their schoolwork done. So sometimes you may need to talk to parents about letting them get some rest and eat breakfast before they come into the learning center. Had a little girl come in. She said, "My belly hurts." I said, "Well, did you eat breakfast?" She said, "Yeah, I ate marshmallows." I said, "My belly be hurting too." You know, it could be, one of the reasons could be an inaccessible supervisor or monitor. You say, "Well, you know, you go up to that little Johnny and you've told him and you've told him and you've told him, and you come up there and you answer that flag and you say, 'You again? What do you want now?' Would you raise your flag if somebody said something like that to you? And maybe, you know, you've got that flag raiser that it seems like just as soon as you get it down and you turn your back to walk away, it pops right back up. You know, you got them that's spring-loaded, it seems like. I don't know where they're getting them from. It seems like every time you turn around, that flag's right back up. And I know there's days you'd like to take a pair of scissors and clip the stalk off of it. I know. But isn't that why we're there? Aren't we there for that student to help them? To aid that home that is trying to raise that child in the nurture and admonition of the Lord and be a vessel usable unto God to raise up children to vessels of honor? Isn't that why we're there? Isn't that what we're there for, to help that child? If that child ever feels like you don't want to answer their flag, they just might not raise it. So an inaccessible supervisor or monitor will cause a negative effect on that learning center. And then it could be a problem subject. You know, there's some kids that just simply hate math. We come to a CEC conference, and they told us, and it's even in our procedures manual. You've read it probably. that you're supposed to do math and English first thing in the morning. Well, there's two reasons for that, and I understand both of them. Number one, they're fresher in the morning. That's usually the harder subjects. You want them to get that done in the morning, and that's usually the ones they struggle with the most and need help. Number two, sometimes when they have homework and go home, the parents can't help them in it. So you want them to do it in the morning, not have homework yet. I understand that. So, buddy, we went home. We implemented that. This is part of that flexibility I was talking about. Sometimes you have to be flexible on some things. And so we went home, buddy, everybody doing math and English first. That's what we're doing. From now on, that's the way it's going to be. Well, this little kid named Noah never had homework hardly ever before. All of a sudden, he starts having homework every night. I pulled him in there. I said, Noah, what's going on, buddy? I mean, you've been sitting there looking at that same page of math for 30 minutes, and that's not getting it done. He said, Preacher Dale, I just hate math. I said, well, what's going on? He said, well, you made me do it first in the morning. I just hate math. Yeah, I mean, he's just going crazy. I said, okay. I said, I tell you what, let's do then. I said, what if I let you do whatever subject you want to do in whatever order you want to do them as long as you don't have homework? He said, yeah, we can do that. So he went to the go-to subject. We all know what that is. Word building. We could just about say that in unison, couldn't we? He goes to the word building first, knocks it out, you know. He gets the English done by first break. He's got 2 subjects done. He does the science and social studies, and after lunch, I mean, by the time he gets to math, he's on the roll and he's got it going, and he hates math so bad he don't want to take it home. So he gets that knocked out before he goes home. Hey, I said, buddy, if you can do that, you do whatever subject in whatever order you want to do. That'll be just fine. Sometimes you have to be a little bit flexible. And then I know y'all are not going to believe this, but sometimes it just boils down to discipline. 20 years ago, just about every child got the same speech before they went to their first day of school. That teacher better not have any problems out of you, or you're going to have problems when you get home. Ain't that right? But now it's almost reverse thing, mindset, and it's pumped into the children that they better not have any trouble out of that teacher. Isn't that about how it is now? And it's just about to the point to where the school and the staff almost never gets the benefit of the doubt anymore. It's almost your fault somehow or another. And so that's a sad commentary. But we're raising a generation that has very little discipline. I mean, they don't even know how to pull their britches up. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to get funny here, but it's just the honest truth. You know, and there's a waistline here, and it's called a waistline because it goes around the waist. Anyway. So what's the result of this cycle? Well, some of the results of this cycle could be discouragement. We don't want to see a child get discouraged because that he's not able to get out of this homework cycle. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. And that the meaning for discouragement is to dishearten, to deprive of courage. Well, we don't want to see that happen in a child's life. So we don't want to see them get discouraged, and then discouragement leads to dismay. Kind of like that snowball effect. You remember them old cartoons, that snowball rolling, and the cow, their arms and legs sticking out, you know. That snowball effect, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And dismay means the fall or loss of courage, the sinking of the spirit, dejection, the yielding to fear. But we don't want to see them get afraid to try, do we? And then that could lead to disaster, that crash and burn effect, where a child just simply loses the love for learning and just doesn't even care to try anymore. We don't want to see that happen. So what's our goals for this student? Well, they're very simple. We want to see academic balance, minimal to no homework, successful learning habits to where they're successfully going on in the paces and moving on in their goals. We want to see and that will produce limitless possibilities. Well, what's some ideas? That's where I want to get to here. What are some ideas for breaking this cycle? Well, first of all, appropriate and reasonable goals. Now, they have to be appropriate goals because we have some goals that we need to accomplish. We have long-term goals that we have to accomplish. We've got to get 12 paces done in each subject. We have to have 6 in a semester. We need to have 3 every quarter. They need to accomplish 3. So we know that. So then we have a minimal amount of goals that they need to have set. So it has to be appropriate enough to where they can still get their goals done long-term, but then they need to be reasonable. You know, there's times when there's several problems on a page and maybe several word problems on a page in math, and sometimes to do 5 pages is not quite reasonable in those days. And there's sometimes when things happen and other things go on in the school and it's hard for them to get it. So they need to be reasonable and appropriate goals. And then maybe a set time for scoring and correcting homework. Maybe, say, by first break, you've got to have that completed. And that's good. You know, they need to start on their today's goals sometime. Maybe you're like me. Maybe you're there real early in the morning. Maybe you don't just walk in when it's just right barely time to start. I hope you don't. Somebody needs to be watching them kids when they get there. But I mean, maybe you're there a little bit early. And you're there, and so maybe that kid can come in 30 minutes early and do the scoring of the homework before open assembly. And then after open assembly, they can start on the day's goals. What's wrong with that if you're willing to and the parents will bring them? So then maybe field trips and personal motivation. You say, well, now we can't take a field trip just because they don't have homework. Well, you don't have to go 4 hours away or stay all week at a camp just because they didn't have homework for a week. You know, I understand that. But, you know, you take teenagers to the mall and you got a friend for life. You know, they'll love that. Maybe just go out in the field and play ball, or maybe have somebody bring in some cookies, or, hey, you know those Pillsbury cookies that comes in the roll? I love them things. You know, I like them raw or cooked. It don't really matter. But you cook them, make a big one, and it's real good and hot. Put some vanilla ice cream on top of that. Pour some hot fudge on that. Hey, I'll get my goals done for that, wouldn't you? Hey, I think they would too, you know. Hey, that's not going to cost much. Have a parent bring in some cookies, some ice cream, maybe do something like that. Maybe say, hey, if you don't have all week, if you don't have homework, then on Monday, whoever don't have homework all week this week, we're going to go outside and have a picnic lunch. All it'll cost you is bringing a blanket to lay on, set on, whatever. What's wrong with that? You know, have a little picnic, let them go out. Maybe you got somebody in the school or in the church that's got a farm. Take them over there and let them play in the field, jump in the hay. I used to love that. You know, play in the barn, run around, play in the fields. Hey, what's wrong with that? You know, maybe somebody's got a pond. Let them go fish for an hour or two on Monday afternoon if they didn't, or on Friday afternoon if they don't have homework. And then sometimes maybe special rewards. Sometimes there's a time that it calls for something just totally out of the box. Had this kid named Andrew. I love Andrew. I called him Granny. The reason I did is because he had it in granny gear all the time. That's the slowest kid I've ever seen. He even talked slow. You know Eeyore and the cartoon. He reminded me of Eeyore. Okay, Preacher Dale. You know, that's the way he talked. He even wrote slow. And he wrote so hard that when he'd write, I mean, you wasn't erasing this pace. And whenever you turn the pages, it's almost like handling the original manuscript. It just crinkled, you know, because it wrote so hard. And he's so slow. And I called him Granny. And Andrew could not get his schoolwork done. He had homework. I'm talking about 2 and 3 pages of goals every night. And so I graduated high school with his mama, and I said, Denise, we got to do something. I've got an idea, and I'm going to try it. She said, anything. I said, okay. I bring Andrew in. I said, Andrew, what can I buy you, son, that costs $10, something like that, you know, or less, if you don't have homework Monday through Friday, just for 1 week? I said, I'm just going to do it 1 week. He said, well, you know, there's this one thing I've been wanting. I didn't even know what he was talking about, some toy he wanted. I said, well, what's something like that cost? I don't know. It's somewhere around $7.62 at Walmart. He knew exactly what that thing cost. I said, well, here's what we're going to do, buddy. Here's a $10 bill. I said, I'm putting it on top of the refrigerator in the lunchroom. On Friday, if you've not had homework all week, it's yours. Go buy that toy. Keep the change, whatever. He didn't know his mama gave me the $10 bill. Hey, get the parents involved. There's nothing wrong with that. And so he said, okay, it's a deal. I said, can you do it? He said, I don't know. I'll try. I said, I believe in you. I know you can. Boy, I encouraged him all week. I was encouraging him every morning. I said, get them done, buddy. Get them done. You know, I'd run into him, break or lunch. I said, how you doing, Andrew? He said, I'm getting there. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, no homework. Come in on Friday about 30 minutes before school was out. I walked in the Learning Center. I said, how's Andrew doing? My wife said, I think he's crying. I just know she's wiping tears. I said, what's the matter with him? She said, I don't know. I said, I was fixing to go see. I said, I'll go talk to him. I went and pulled him out. I said, Andrew, what's going on, buddy? He said, Preacher Dale, I ain't going to make it. I ain't going to make it. I said, what's the matter? He said, I just went and scored my math. Look, I got 2 pages full of corrections I got to do. I said, Andrew, you got 30 minutes left, buddy. You can do it. Come on. Let's get in there and go at it. You can get it done. He said, you think so? I said, I know you can. He got it done. So then I took him in the lunchroom, had him, his mama, my wife, the monitor, and me. We went in there. I took that $10 bill. I presented it to him. I mean, it's like he graduated college, and I was giving him his diploma. I made a big deal out of it. I ain't kidding. See, I didn't know this till after. His mama told me. She said there's a public school teacher told him, said, you'll never amount to anything. You'll never get an education. You'll never go to college because you can't do the work. I'm not bashing public school, but Maybe that teacher. Because that ain't right from anybody. I mean, she crushed that kid just that quick. You know, whoever come up with that, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words never hurt you, they've never had anybody say anything to them. They've lived alone somewhere on an island. But I'm going to tell you something. That kid coming out, I give him that. I hugged him. I told him how proud I was of him. His mama's crying. My wife was crying. He was crying. I said, great. You'd have thought he had graduated college. But you know what I did? I said, you know what now, Andrew? He said, yeah. I said, what? He said, you're going to expect it. I said, yeah, I am going to expect it. I said, but you know why? He said, why is that? I said, because you have proven to me. You've proven to your supervisor and your monitor. You've proven it to your mom. I said, but forget about us. I said, now you've proven it to yourself that you can do it. I said, now, not only am I going to expect it, now you're going to expect it. See, all this time he's been coming in expecting not to finish, expecting to have all this homework, expecting to be behind. But now he went home and he had broke that cycle. I want to tell you something. I'd have paid that $10 bill 10 times over to see the look on that kid's face that day. So whatever it takes, let's break that cycle. And then I need to mention this hurriedly. But in the Old Testament, you know, when the children of Israel would get in such a debt that they could not repay it, and the debt mounted up to where they couldn't handle it, they'd wind up sold into bondage and slavery, and they'd have to work off that debt. They'd lose their land, they'd lose their house, their children would be in slavery, their wife and them be in the fields working. But in that year of Jubilee, when the trumpets sound, boy, can't you see Daddy coming up out of the field and Mama coming up out of the kitchen, them youngins getting up behind them, and they're heading back to the house. The trumpet sounded. We're free, thank God. Hey, you know, sometimes that homework gets so big and it keeps getting so far behind and the mountain gets so tall, and you know little Johnny is never going to get that homework done and get caught up, and he's just falling further behind. Sometimes you just need to sound a trumpet and set little Johnny free. Sometimes you're just going to have to draw a line in the sand, wipe a slate clean, whatever you want to call it, and start afresh today and say we're starting. Now, you can't do that every week. You can't do that every quarter, or we're going to lose appropriate goals. We're going to not reach that final goal that we need to get to. There's even been times, I don't have this up here, but there's even been times where we had a child that had a severe case of Asperger's. I mean, really bad social skills. He wouldn't even look at you. And he struggled when he first come. You know, it's just a whole new system. And struggled bad. And he couldn't get his work done. You put 5 courses in front of him, paces, and say you got to do 4 pages in each one a day. He looked like he was looking at a mountain. He was so overwhelmed. You know what we wound up doing? We pulled the staples out of that pace, cut it right up the middle, punched holes in it, and put it in a 3-ring binder. Every morning my daughter would come in the learning center, and she'd open that binder up, and she'd pull out 1 page of math, and she laid it on Jeremy's desk. She said, here's your math, Jeremy. Said, you do this front and back and raise your flag, and then I'll be back. And you said, well, that's crazy. Why is it? We're taking 12 paces, down to 6 paces, down to 3 paces, down to 4 pages a day. Why don't we just chop it up a little more? It's all right. If you've got a child that feels overwhelmed, you do whatever it takes to make them comfortable. You know he's still homeschooling, and his mama still does that very thing. Because when we started doing that, that kid got his goals done by lunchtime. I was amazed. And my daughter's the one come up with that. She's the one in the learning center. She said, Dad, can I try something? I said, honey, you try whatever you want to do. If it works, we'll do it. So you do whatever it takes to break that cycle for that child. And if you need to chop it up a little bit more, chop it up a little bit more. That's fine. And so we need to watch our hearts. Finally, we need to watch our hearts towards a child that's in this cycle. You know, don't get aggravated with that child. You know, you need to break the me syndrome. This thing isn't about you. You know, it's about that child in your learning center. We're not there, and I hope you didn't get into Christian education for the money. Bless your heart. Because it ain't like that. So I hope you're there because you want to make a difference in some child's life. I hope you're there because you have a heart for that ministry. And I believe that a child that is offended is a child that will be defeated. And over there in Luke 17, verse number 2, the Bible says something like this. For it were better that a millstone were tied about his neck and He cast into the midst of the sea than to offend one of the least of these, my little ones. Over there in Matthew 19:14, Jesus said, Suffer the little children and forbid them not to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven. Right now, just for a second, would you do something for me? In your mind, would you go back to your learning center and look around that learning center at all them faces, all them children? Maybe you're an administrator. Look around that school this morning in that open assembly at them faces. You know what Jesus said about them? For such is the kingdom of heaven. And over there in Jude 22, He said, And of some have compassion, making a difference. I'll tell you one thing. You break that cycle for that child, you'll make a difference in his life forever. Andrew's in college today. Thank God. He broke that cycle that day. I didn't break it. He broke it. He broke that cycle that day. When you break that cycle for that child, you're going to help them from now on to develop some successful learning habits, to go on in their education and for the glory of God. It'll be worth whatever it costs you, I promise.